The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina MacKenzie.
It's Culinary Corner time. We are going to be talking to Cathy Katin Grazzini about her book, Love the Foods That Love the Planet, Recipes That Cool the Climate and Excite the Senses. Welcome to the show, Cathy.
Oh, thanks so much, Selina. Glad to be here.
Now, I believe you're a health and sustainability chef. So can you tell us a bit more about the connection with what we eat and climate change?
Yeah, so there's a big connection between what we're eating. The food systems emit more than a third of total greenhouse gas emissions. So it's an enormous piece of the climate puzzle. And specifically, the types of foods we eat can make all the difference to those total emissions. I used to think that the most impactful thing that we could do as individuals was to eat locally, the produce all around us. And it turns out, yes, transportation costs are a factor, but what really drives food emissions is the way the land is purposed. Is it clear cut? Are we deforesting our green spaces? Are we draining wetlands of their water? And how agricultural practices, how sustainable are they in terms of irrigation or pesticides or herbicides or all sorts of soil amendments and all the practices running farm equipment? It's all pretty much still based on using fossil fuels, which are, the most provocative aspect of what generates greenhouse gas emissions that warm the planet. But it turns out that the land use, the agricultural practices, and how much food is lost and wasted all along the supply chain really drive what's emissions in the food sector. And the foods specifically that are most impactful start with livestock, beef cattle, lamb and mutton, those ruminant animals, dairy cows, cheese, but also farm seafood, pork, and poultry. But it's not just livestock, although that's the lion's share of what drives food emissions. There are certain plant foods also that are right up at the top of the list because they're grown so unsustainably, like coffee and chocolate, and there are a couple of others. But those are the exceptions. In general, the lowest emitting foods are in the plant and in the fungi kingdoms. So the more that we can lean into plants, the more we can begin to favor foods that are low emitting, the much happier the climate will be, because we can really dramatically lower our household greenhouse gas footprint by shifting the foods in the plant direction.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that in the main, shifting the food supply away from animals to plants will create low carbon dishes. But is a plant-based diet good for us?
Yeah, it turns out not only is it great for the planet, it is incredibly healthy for all of us because it really drives down systemic inflammation in our bodies, which are the main drivers of all chronic diseases that are the diseases that really plague us in all over the world today. So heart disease, certain cancers, autoimmune diseases, and all their risk factors really quiet down when we have these low-fat, fiber-rich foods that are the fruits of the earth, as it turns out. So it's really great for our health. We lose weight very easily, so it's a win-win for the planet and for humanity.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea for a book because you've made the recipes not boring. I mean, we've got mango salsa, we've got salad with baby roasted beets and citrus. We've got all sorts of things in there. But I do always ask my Culinary Corner guests, are there any desserts in there, Cathy?
Oh, indeed there are, because what cookbook would be replete without a nice section on sweets? So, yeah, in the dessert section, they're mostly fruit-based. There's, with a little bit of dough because that makes it much more exciting to eat. So we've got cherry desserts and apple desserts. And let me just flip over to that section here. All sorts of goodies. We have a clafoutis made with cherries, and we've got plums. I really tried to diversify. We've got crostatine, a little nod to Italy. So all the recipes in this cookbook are really pay homage to the wonderful food traditions of home cooks from all over the world, because diversifying what we're eating in the plant kingdom is equally good for the planet. It really makes the agricultural system much more resilient instead of depending on just monocrops we're growing. And so I try to introduce a lot of recipes with ingredients that folks in the West may not, they may be familiar with, but maybe less so. So, whole grains, different types of legumes and vegetables, but drawing on the traditions from Japan and Denmark and West Africa and everywhere, because that's great for our gut microbiome, but it also alleviates a lot of the pressures on the climate, especially as things continue to warm, and we're getting very near some dangerous limits in the climate system right now.
Yeah, and is it just a cookery book, or do you go into the science of climate change as well?
Well, there's an introductory section which lays out the case for why eat this way, why eat for the planet, what can it do for us, what can it do to really dramatically lower greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, there was a recent study, I think it came out last year, University of Oxford, that indicated that compared to folks that have, let's say, the equivalent of a very skinny burger a la McDonald's or something along those lines, one a day, when you eat plant-based, you can lower your total emissions in your home by a whopping 75%. Just by tweaking the food part of it, And of course, there are many things we can do in terms of the appliances we use and energy in the house as well, and vehicles and all the rest. But the food is a huge piece of this, and it's something that we all can do. We have agency, we don't have to rely on our leaders and politics and new technologies to come along. The planet is really screaming for help right now, and it's a way that we all can do our bit.
Yeah, indeed. Well, one of the recipes in the book, which sounds yummy, is asparagus recoup soup with crispy croutons, and you've kindly offered to tell us how to make it.
Oh, yeah. So I wanted to share this recipe because it's an indication of one very creative way. I have a bunch of these throughout the cookbook of how to really lower our kitchen waste stream, and deliciously. And this is one example of this. So my asparagus I call it a recoup soup because this soup relies on those woody bottoms of asparagus spears that so often we break off and toss in our garbage, and it ends up in our landfills. But this soup, we're going to be using, and it's such a simple soup. It's economical and it's fast to make. And I give a recipe as part of this soup section on how to make our own crispy croutons. So I'll talk about that as well. So it takes about 5 minutes to prep the soup, 5 minutes to blend it and season it. And cooking can range as easily as 5 minutes for those very thin asparagus spears to maybe 15, 20 minutes if they're the very thick ones. But we basically are just breaking off the stems and simmering them in water for until they're very super tender, which again, 5 to 15, 20 minutes is all it takes. And once it can be pierced with a knife easily and falls right off it, then we're going to drain them, but we're going to reserve our cooking water. And using a high-speed blender, we're going to pop those cooked asparagus bottoms in there with only as much of the cooking water as we desire for the texture of soup that we want. So you want to start small. You can make this very dense, or you can make this a little smoother, but the texture that you'll get in a blender will be velvety smooth. And so that's the foundation of the dish. And then we're going to simply season it minimally, because the flavor notes from the asparagus spears, when they're cooked with just this very simple way, are just so delicate and floral and lovely that we don't want to obscure it with a lot of heavy seasoning. So what I use is just a couple of teaspoons. But again, this is based on 2 pounds of fresh asparagus that produce whatever amount of bottoms that they produce. So it's just a couple of cups worth. This is a serving for 2. And for that, just 2 teaspoons of nutritional yeast, a couple of grinds of white pepper. And then when we serve it, so we're gonna add that to the blender and blend it all up and to get the flavor we want. And when we serve it, unless you're going to finish the whole little pot of soup in that one sitting, then you can flavor the pot. We're just going to add a little bit of diluted shiro miso, the white miso paste, which is so delicate. And actually, shiro miso is not only does it add a little bit of flavor, which is just delectable, it's almost cheesy flavored together with the nutritional yeast especially, but it's also health benefits for cooking with misos, especially you add them at the very end of cooking. So the probiotic characteristics of a miso paste, you can reap those benefits as well. And that's pretty much it for the soup. I garnish it with some chopped chives and my homemade croutons. And if you like, a little sprinkle of chili flakes, or I'm using chili in the photograph in the book, a little mound of chili threads, because they're so colorful and they're very pretty against the soup.
Well, it sounds delicious. Absolutely delicious.
So simple. And you can recoup any vegetable. So you can use the stems of broccolis or cauliflower or cabbage cores or stems of collards or kale, or, all these, they make a more assertive soup than the asparagus, which is so light and delicate, but equally delicious and so beneficial as a way to repurpose, foods or parts of foods in our kitchen that we normally don't.
Yeah, no waste. We don't want waste. Well, sadly, we're out of time, but the book isn't actually out until the 19th of December, I believe, but it's called Love the Foods That Love the Planet, Recipes That Cool the Climate and Excite the Senses, and it's by Cathy Katin Grazzini, who we're speaking to now. Cathy, do you have a website if people want to find out more about you?
Yes, it's Cathy'sKitchenPrescription.com. No apostrophe, just Cathy with a C. And, the book in the States is already out. It was out on the 5th of November, but maybe in Europe it's out a month later. I'm not really sure. Yeah. But it's available wherever books are sold, on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, any local bookshop can get it. It's widely available. And it's chock full of photographs, so it's a very visual book and makes a lovely holiday gift.
I'm sure it does. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Cathy, and you take care now.
Oh, thank you so much. Enjoy.
My pleasure.
All righty. Take care.
Bye-bye.